At mile marker 73 on U.S. Route 95, Nevada Highway Patrol closed both lanes of traffic at 2:16 in the morning. A semi-tractor trailer and a tow truck had collided in the dark 13 miles north of the small town of Batty. Both drivers were confirmed dead at the scene before sunrise. There were no other cars involved. There didn't need to be. On this road, at this hour, 2 vehicles and a few seconds of darkness were enough. No streetlights marked the spot. No witnesses saw it happen. Just a trooper's dashboard clock reading 2:16 a.m. and a stretch of 2-lane highway that had once again done what it does best. Within hours, Nevada Highway Patrol had rerouted every northbound and southbound driver onto a detour nearly 200 miles long, because on this road there is often no shorter way around a closure. There is only more of the same darkness, in a different direction. Between Las Vegas and Reno, there are 2 ways to go. One is Interstate 80, the long way around, with gas stations, cell towers, and enough traffic to keep you awake. The other is U.S. Route 95, cutting straight up the center of Nevada through more than 400 miles of high desert, ghost towns, and open range. It is shorter, it is faster, if nothing goes wrong. And after the sun goes down, it becomes one of the least forgiving stretches of pavement in the American West. Your headlights reach roughly 300 feet ahead of you. At 65 miles an hour, that gives you about 3 seconds to react to whatever is standing in the road. A burro doesn't wait for you to see it first. Neither does an oncoming car with a driver who has been staring at the same white line for the last hour and a half. Before we go further, if you've ever driven this stretch after dark, or if you're watching this from somewhere along Route 95 right now, tell me where you are down in the comments. This channel exists because people keep sending in the roads that scared them. And this one comes up more than almost any other. If you want more of these, the subscribe button is right there, and it costs nothing. Now, back to the highway. U.S. Route 95 is the longest highway in the state of Nevada, running 646.71 miles from the California line near Palm Gardens all the way north to the Oregon border at McDermott. Most of that length is signed as the Veterans Memorial Highway, a designation it has carried since it was first established as a numbered route on January 1, 1940. It has existed in some form for nearly 90 years, carved through terrain that the federal highway system was never particularly eager to tame. The stretch that concerns us runs from Las Vegas up through Indian Springs, past the Nevada National Security Site at Mercury, through Amargosa Valley, Beatty, Goldfield, and Tonopah, before continuing on toward Hawthorne, Schertz, and Fallon, where drivers heading to Reno peel off onto smaller connector roads to finish the trip. From Coaldale, west of Tonopah, Reno sits roughly 196 miles further north by way of US 95 alternate. The whole drive, door to door, covers more ground than the distance from Boston to Washington, D.C., much of it without a single traffic light. To understand why this particular road became this dangerous, you have to understand what it was built through. Nevada sits inside what geologists call the Basin and Range Province, a landscape made of dozens of narrow mountain ranges running roughly north to south, separated by flat desert valleys. Las Vegas sits at just under 2,000 feet above sea level. Tonopah, close to the halfway point, sits at 6,047 feet. To get from one to the other, U.S. 95 doesn't skirt around the mountains in between. It climbs over them and drops back down, basin after range after basin, for hour after hour of driving. Each climb changes your tire grip, your visibility, and sometimes your weather, all within the same 20-minute span. A road that starts as warm desert asphalt outside Las Vegas can end the same night as an icy mountain grade above 6,000 feet, with drivers who never adjusted their speed for the difference. Tonopah's own climate data describes an arid, cold desert with cool winters and hot summers, and because of the town's dryness and altitude, its daily temperature swings run unusually large, sometimes more than 40 degrees between a warm afternoon and a freezing night. One traveler passing through in winter described arriving at dusk to find snowmelt on the town's steep main street, already refreezing into black ice by nightfall. A transformation that happens fast enough to catch even careful drivers off guard. The town of Tonopah itself exists because of a story that has followed US 95 since before the highway had a number. In 1900, a prospector named Jim Butler was searching for a burro that had wandered off overnight. According to the account passed down through generations, when he finally found the animal sheltering near a rock outcropping, he picked up a stone to throw at it out of frustration and noticed it was unusually heavy. That rock turned out to be silver ore, and Butler had stumbled onto the second richest silver strike in Nevada history. Historians now consider parts of that story likely embellished, and local records suggest Butler's wife, Belle, a Paiute woman, and her family may have guided him to ground long known to indigenous people for its surface minerals. Whatever the truth, the town that grew out of that discovery still sits exactly where the highway needs it most. A fuel stop and a waypoint at 6,047 feet, roughly midway between Las Vegas and Reno, in the middle of a landscape that offers almost nothing else in between. 27 miles south of Tonopah, US 95 passes through Goldfield, sitting at 5,686 feet and serving as the seat of Esmeralda County. A county so sparsely populated that its courthouse still governs a landscape most residents of the state will never see up close. Between 1903 and 1940, Goldfield's mines produced more than $86 million in gold at prices from that era, enough to briefly make it the largest city in Nevada. A fire in 1923 destroyed much of what had been built, and the town never fully recovered. Today, its population sits at 225 people, down from 440 just 20 years ago, and the handful of surviving buildings, including a hotel that has sat closed for decades, stand as a visual warning to anyone driving through after dark. This is what happens when a place this remote runs out of reasons for people to stay. The gas station, if it's open, may be the only lit building for the next 40 miles. The road also passes within a short drive of Area 51 and the broader Nevada Test and Training Range. And further east, the officially designated extraterrestrial highway draws its own steady stream of curious travelers toward the tiny outpost of Rachel. That detour isn't part of the direct Vegas to Reno route, but it explains part of who shares this road with you at night. UFO tourists working their way back to Tonopah after a day chasing rumors near the base perimeter. Stargazers heading to the astronomy park on the edge of town, and a steady undercurrent of Department of Energy and defense personnel commuting to and from the security perimeter further south. It is a strange mix of traffic for a road this empty, but out here, nearly everyone ends up funneling through the same two lanes eventually. That isolation is not incidental to the danger. It is the danger. For long sections of this route, particularly the roughly 100 miles between Indian Springs and Beatty and the stretch north through Goldfield toward Tonopah, there are no gas stations, no restaurants, and often no other cars. The Nevada Department of Transportation puts it plainly in its own rural safety guidance. Keep your tank full, because next gas signs can mean 50 miles or more of nothing. The department's recommendations for rural travel read like a checklist for entering terrain that assumes you might be on your own for a while. Check your tires, brakes, and fluids before you leave. Carry extra water and a basic emergency kit. Plan your route in advance using the state's road condition service. Because once you're out here, you may not be able to look anything up. Cell coverage is just as unreliable. Travelers passing through Tonopah have reported entire carriers with no signal at all in the area, forcing them to rely on hotel Wi-Fi or GPS units with no live connection back to anyone. If your car breaks down, or worse, at 11 at night on this stretch, you may be the only living thing for miles who knows it happened. The traffic mix out here compounds the risk. Long-haul trucking companies use this corridor as a direct shortcut between Southern California, Las Vegas, and the industrial and agricultural centers of northern Nevada, meaning much of the traffic sharing the road with a tired family in a sedan is 18 wheels of freight, moving at highway speed, piloted by a driver on their own long shift, in the dark, on a road with no passing lanes and no rumble strips in most sections to warn either of them if they start to drift. Add in RV traffic pulling toward Death Valley and the high desert campgrounds further north, tourists chasing the darkest skies in the lower 48 at the Tonopah Stargazing Park, and the ordinary commuters who drive this route daily simply because it's the only route that exists, and you get a highway carrying a strange and constant mixture of vehicle types and driver fatigue levels, all funneled onto the same 2 lanes for hundreds of miles at a stretch. For most of its length outside the Las Vegas metro area, U.S., 95 is a 2-lane undivided highway. There is no median, no barrier, nothing but a painted yellow line separating you from oncoming traffic moving toward you at a closing speed that can exceed 130 miles an hour combined. The Nevada Department of Transportation has identified head-on collisions as among the most frequent and deadly outcomes on rural 2-lane roads exactly like this one, and its safety guidance specifically warns drivers to pass only in marked zones with ample clearance. Because on a road this straight and this empty, the temptation to pass grows with every mile of nothing in front of you. Add fatigue into that equation, what highway safety officials call highway hypnosis, the numbing, monotonous pull of a straight desert road at night, and a driver's attention can drift for a second or two at exactly the wrong moment. Nevada law requires headlights to be on from 30 minutes after sunset to 30 minutes before sunrise. And on one 61-mile stretch north of Coaldale toward Hawthorne, the state requires daytime headlight use as well. An unusual rule that exists because the visibility on that section is considered hazardous enough to need it around the clock. Even the trucking rules along this corridor hint at how seriously the state treats certain stretches. Hazardous materials are barred from passing directly through the town of Hawthorne, and trucks carrying them are rerouted onto a separate truck route around it. A detour built specifically because the risk of a hazardous cargo incident on the main road was judged too high. Nevada's Department of Transportation has approved that truck bypass through multiple planning cycles since it was first introduced, even over objections from local business owners who worried about losing passing tourist traffic. A sign of how differently officials weigh risk once you leave the freeway sections near Las Vegas behind. And then there are the animals. Long before U.S. 95 existed, this land belonged to free-roaming horses and burros, descendants of animals released or escaped from 19th and early 20th century mining and ranching operations. Today, managed herds still range across public land flanking the highway. The Nevada Wild Horse Range, north of Las Vegas near Cold Creek, maintains an appropriate management level of roughly 300 to 500 wild horses, while nearby herd management areas around Red Rock support additional bands of horses and burros across more than 500,000 acres stretching toward the highway corridor. These animals cross the road when they choose to, day or night, and a 900-pound horse or a 400-pound burro standing motionless in a dark travel lane is nearly invisible until your headlights are already on top of it. Statewide, Nevada records more than 500 reported wildlife collisions a year, costing the public an estimated $19 million and killing an estimated 5,000 animals annually. And officials believe more than half of all such collisions go unreported entirely. Deer, elk, and livestock are most active at dawn and dusk, precisely the hours when many drivers are pushing to make it to the next town before dark, or deciding to keep going after it. Livestock adds its own layer to the problem in this part of the state, since much of the land bordering the highway is open range, meaning cattle are legally permitted to roam unfenced, and a driver who assumes the road ahead is clear simply because no fence line suggests otherwise is making an assumption this highway has punished before. That's the mechanism. Straight roads, steep elevation changes, no shoulders worth trusting, no help for 50 miles, and large animals that don't know what a travel lane is. What follows are the moments when all of that stopped being theoretical. The first happened close to the city, where the danger of Route 95 is easy to underestimate simply because the lights of Las Vegas are still visible in the mirror. 27-year-old Nakia Morgan of Las Vegas was driving southbound on the US 95 off-ramp at Valley View when she lost control of her vehicle. The car rotated across the off-ramp, left the paved surface, entered a gravel area, and rolled. Morgan, who was not wearing a seatbelt, was partially ejected during the rollover and died from her injuries. Nevada Highway Patrol's Southern Command later noted the crash as one of dozens of fatal collisions the region investigates in a single year on this corridor alone. It is a reminder that the danger of this highway doesn't begin at some dramatic desert boundary sign out past the last gas station. It begins the moment you merge onto it, inside city limits, on pavement that still looks like an ordinary freeway. Roughly 20 miles north of the Las Vegas Valley, the road narrows as it passes a formation called Snow Mountain, and it was here. Just after 10:44 on the night of January 2nd, 2026, that 59-year-old David Gene Offenbaugh of North Las Vegas was riding his motorcycle home. According to Nevada State Police Highway Patrol, Offenbaugh was traveling south, just south of mile marker 100, when a wild burro standing motionless in the travel lane appeared in front of him. The motorcycle struck the animal, overturned, and Offenbaugh was ejected. He was pronounced dead at the scene. His wife, Kimberly, later described learning of his death when his phone's location pinged from the coroner's office, a moment she said she would never forget. The family has since called for better fencing and desert barriers along that stretch, noting how many people, including personnel commuting to nearby federal facilities, drive that same dark corridor every single night. A memorial now stands beside the mile marker 100 sign, marking the exact spot where the road and the open range collided. Daylight does not make this highway safe, only differently dangerous. 69-year-old Chamroon Sasser was identified by the Clark County Coroner's Office as the victim of a collision between a tractor-trailer and a motorcycle at the intersection of US 95 and Lee Canyon Road in the Northwest Valley, an afternoon crash that shut down the northbound lanes for hours while investigators worked the scene. It is worth noting that this happened not in some remote basin 200 miles from help, but on a stretch of highway still within view of the city. a reminder that speed, traffic mixing, and inattention can be just as lethal as isolation. Further north, past the last suburbs and into true desert, the crashes turn from single-vehicle tragedies into head-on collisions between drivers who never saw each other coming. Nevada Highway Patrol responded to a crash at mile marker 40, between the towns of Amargosa and Beatty, a stretch where the highway runs flat and straight for miles across the Amargosa Valley floor, tempting drivers into higher and higher speeds. Two vehicles met head-on. 2 people were pronounced dead at the scene, and 2 more were transported with critical injuries, while the highway was closed in both directions for the investigation. Further along, past Beatty, at mile marker 105, approximately 45 miles north of town, 2 sport utility vehicles collided head-on on a Sunday afternoon. 1 adult female driver was confirmed dead at the scene. Nevada Highway Patrol urged motorists to slow down and use caution as investigators worked the shoulder of the road, a routine request that, on this highway, carries more weight than it does almost anywhere else in the state, where the shoulder itself is often nothing more than a few feet of gravel before open desert. Not every fatal crash on Route 95 happens between strangers who simply drifted into each other's lane in the daylight. South of the small outpost of Mercury, once the staging town for the underground and atmospheric nuclear tests conducted at the site through the Cold War, and now the security checkpoint controlling access to the renamed Nevada National Security Site. Near mile marker 132, 2 vehicles collided at 8:21 in the evening, the kind of hour when the sky is fully dark, but traffic hasn't necessarily thinned out yet. Both drivers were pronounced dead at the scene, and Nevada State Police shut the highway down in both directions, rerouting northbound traffic through Indian Springs while investigators worked through the night under portable floodlights, the only artificial light for miles in either direction. It is worth pausing here, at the midpoint of this story, to say that if you've made it this far, the subscribe button really does help this channel keep documenting roads like this one. Now, back to the highway, and back to mile marker 73 where we started. That crash, the one that opened this video. The semi-tractor trailer and the tow truck colliding at 2:16 in the morning 13 miles north of Beatty fits a pattern that anyone who studies this highway will recognize immediately. It happened in complete darkness, on a stretch with no lighting, no shoulder wide enough to offer real refuge, and no other traffic to warn either driver in time. Nevada Highway Patrol closed both directions and rerouted traffic through a chain of 2-lane state highways, US 93, State Route 318, State Route 375, and US 6, a nearly 200-mile detour required simply because there is no redundancy built into this part of the state. When Route 95 closes, there often isn't a fast way around it. There's only the long way, through more of the same kind of road, past the same kind of open range, under the same kind of sky with no city glow to soften it. What connects every one of these incidents? The wild burrow at mile marker 100, the rollover at Valley View, the tractor-trailer collision at Lee Canyon Road, the head-on crashes at mile markers 40, 73, 105, and 132, is not bad luck distributed randomly across 400 miles of desert. It's a road built for a different era of traffic, running through terrain that never got easier just because more people started driving it. Nevada's own transportation officials acknowledge the imbalance directly. Only about 10% of Nevadans live in rural areas, yet those roads account for nearly a quarter of the state's fatal crashes. That single statistic describes Route 95 almost perfectly. It is a highway where mile markers do more work than street signs, where the distance between one town's city limit and the next can swallow an hour of driving with nothing but sagebrush and mountain silhouettes in between, and where every one of those miles carries the same set of risks after the sun goes down: fatigue, wildlife, oncoming headlights, and grades that turn from warm asphalt to black ice with no warning sign to tell you which one you're on. Nevada has not ignored the problem entirely. Elsewhere in the state, wildlife safety crossings, dedicated overpasses and underpasses designed to let deer, elk, and other large animals cross above or below the traffic have been built along Interstate 80 between Wendover and Wells and along US 93 north of Wells, part of a partnership between the Department of Transportation and the Department of Wildlife aimed at the roadways with the highest collision rates. Research from the University of Nevada, Reno has shown a measurable drop in vehicle-animal collisions in the years after those crossings went in. No comparable infrastructure currently exists along the Wild Horse and Burro corridors of US 95 north of Las Vegas, the same stretch where David Auchenbaugh died. There is at least a longer-term plan for the highway itself. Nevada has been studying a proposed extension of Interstate 11 that would follow the US 95 corridor from Las Vegas through Tonopah and on toward Reno and Sparks. A project that has been in public outreach and planning phases since 2018, and which could eventually bring divided lanes, wider shoulders, and modern lighting to a route that has operated largely unchanged since the mid-20th century. For now, that remains a proposal, not a road. Until then, Nevada's Zero Fatalities safety campaign continues to lean on the same basic advice it has offered for years. Advice repeated every summer as travel season picks up: keep your tank full. Plan your route before you leave cell coverage behind. Watch for animals most heavily at dawn and dusk. Only pass in marked zones with real clearance. And above all, take breaks before highway hypnosis takes the decision out of your hands. Officials remind drivers that seatbelts remain the single most effective tool for surviving a crash on these roads, cutting the risk of injury roughly in half, a detail that sits uncomfortably close to at least one of the stories told here tonight. It is simple advice. It is also, if the last several years of crash reports are any indication, advice that gets ignored on this stretch of road more often than almost anywhere else in the state. Somewhere north of Las Vegas tonight, past the point where the city glow fades out of your rearview mirror, US 95 is doing what it has always done, running straight and dark through open range, carrying travelers toward Tonopah and beyond, past a small memorial standing quietly next to a sign marked mile marker 100. Somewhere on that same stretch, a trucker hauling freight toward Reno is watching the fuel gauge, doing the math on whether the tank will make it to the next open station. Somewhere else, a family in a rental car is arguing about whether to push through to Tonopah tonight or pull off at the next motel they can find, unaware that the difference between those two choices has more than once been the difference between arriving and not. The road doesn't announce its dangers. It rarely gives a warning sign for the one that matters. There is no sign at mile marker 40 that says 2 people died there. There is no sign at mile marker 132 that tells you a driver just like you didn't make it home from that spot. The only marker most people ever see is the one near mile marker 100, the small memorial that David Auchenbaugh's family placed beside the highway sign. Quiet enough that most drivers pass it doing 75 without ever slowing down to read it. The road just waits for the moment your headlights arrive 3 seconds too late. If you're planning that drive after dark, fill the tank before you leave town. Watch the shoulders more than the horizon, and remember that on this highway, the emptiest stretch is very rarely as empty as it looks. Somewhere out there in the dark, Something with 4 legs and no understanding of a travel lane may already be standing exactly where you're about to be. If you've driven this road yourself, day or night, I want to hear what it was like for you. So leave it in the comments below.